Atamari e koutou, no mai haramai ki tēnei hui. Welcome to the Prosperous Napier Committee meeting for the 10th of October. Welcome to everyone online. I see that Councillor Simpson is joining us via there as well, so welcome. Could I just remind everyone that this meeting is being live streamed on our Facebook page, and if we could all please stand for our opening karakia. Tūtawa mai ronga, tūtawa mai raro, tūtawa mai roko, tūtawa mai waho. Kia tau mai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai e. Right, we'll kick off with our apologies. I have apologies this morning from Councillor Crystal and Councillor Taylor. I have someone to move those. Thank you, Councillor Mawson, and seconded by Councillor Tariha. All those in favour?
Councillor Crystal?
I said, sorry, did I say Councillor Crystal and Councillor Taylor? I did.
Bogue?
Sorry, I forgot, and Councillor Bogue. Are you happy to accept
yes,
that?
I'm happy to accept.
Sorry, that's just because it wasn't written on my bit of paper in front of me, but now it is. Are you happy to second that still?
Yes.
Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Any conflicts of interest on today's agenda? Nope. Any announcements by the Mayor? Any announcements from our Chief Executive or from our Acting Director? No. And are there any minor matters that aren't on the agenda? Nope. Great. We'll move on to our confirmation of minutes from our previous Prosperous Napier meeting that was held on the 29th of August. Can I have someone to move that they are taken as a true and accurate record of the meeting, please? Thank you, Councillor Tariha, and I will second from the Chair. No one had any matters arising from them? Any corrections? No. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And that is carried. Thank you. And we'll move to our first agenda item. I'd like to welcome John Nichols and Rochelle Ham from Hawke's Bay Airport Limited to present their annual report to us. Welcome to both.
G'day. Kia ora. I'm obviously John, and I'm one of the directors of Hawke's Bay Airport. Rochelle has put together a good slide deck to discuss this morning, so I'll throw it over to Rochelle in a second. But first, thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's always great to be able to chat to shareholders of the airport. It's been a great year. Our financial year ending is June, which is the bulk of our report, but Rochelle also has a slide in here about how things are tracking so far this year, because June is quite a while ago. So I have 2 or 3 areas that I really want to touch on, but I'll throw it over to Rochelle to go through the slide pack.
Okay, so as we did last year, it's always good just to present to you our key highlights for the year, because we sort of feel there have been quite a few. There's been some upsides and downsides, but we'll just take you through some of the key things that we feel like we've achieved well this year. So first of all, we celebrated our 60th anniversary. So 2024 is the year that Hawke's Bay Airport turned 60. We've carried out some activations within the terminal. You would have seen the 60 sign if you've flown through there, but we also had some celebrations, and I think some of you were actually at some of them. So we, in conjunction with that, we also did the fire truck naming competition, which actually the engagement that garnered was incredible. And we're talking national and international. I think we featured in some Australian Farmer magazine as well. So a real highlight in terms of engagement with community for us this year. We've come a long way. We've done a lot of work on digital enhancement within our operations, but also financials and how we report and the sorts of things we think about. So we now have quite a few dashboards that are about to go live, which we think are going to make a massive difference to how we manage day to day and the sort of information that we're getting. So it helps us forecast into the future. In terms of passengers, we ended the year at 655,000. We were forecasting to be higher than that in about February, but the last quarter really dropped off for us. So we'll come back to where we see passenger numbers going and some of the challenges we're facing there when we talk about FY25. Our Profit after tax number was 2.2, but was then impacted by having to make the adjustment for building depreciation change, which was 3.06 million. Revenue 13.03, so up on last year. Last year was 12.6, so a 400k improvement on fairly similar passenger numbers. So no, not massive growth, but steady growth nonetheless. EBITDA 7.3, so pretty much in line with last year, despite some cost challenges, particularly around insurance and some of our staffing events during the year. We're really proud of the capital works that we actually completed during the financial year. I think if you go back a year, we spent not much over $2 million. This year we've actually spent 6 and really advanced some of the state of our aprons, our taxiways and buildings around and infrastructure around the terminal. So feel like we've actually made the leap and that will continue into FY25. We were recertified with our Part 139 certification, which means we can operate as an aerodrome. So that happened in September 2023. So
it's quite an important milestone.
But quite a process and a pretty thorough audit to get that recertified. So we were pretty pleased to get that with no significant findings. So that was a great result. We maintained our Level 4+ airport carbon accreditation, and one of our focuses going into FY25 is not just to maintain that, but also look broader at ESG frameworks and how that plays into how we operate. Big celebration, 5 years of operation of the Ambassador program in the airport. So I think it's really cool that and originally there were 38 when that program first started that were recruited. 28 of them are still there, still with us. And we've sort of spent quite a bit of time thinking about how we not only protect them, you know, like people can be quite aggressive, so what we do and don't let them do, they are volunteers, but they are certainly an amazing face to our airport and we want to continue that program. Just a point about Hawke's Bay Airport Construction, which was a company that we held to essentially build the terminal. That has now been amalgamated because all activity is now finished. So that was quite a decent win just before year end for us. In terms of route development, that work is ongoing, but we did manage to secure Sun Air services to Hamilton and Tauranga. After the cyclone, they came in and did Wairoa Gisborne. They're now doing Hamilton and Tauranga in addition to that service. So quite an interesting year, quite a lot happening. Hopefully that gives you a fairly good overview.
I just wanted to highlight one of the points Rochelle picked up on around technology. Like the boards had a real strong focus on tech and dashboards, and some of the dashboards and data we've got at Hawke's Bay Airport is some of the best on any boards that I'm on. Like Rochelle and the team hoover up all the data from Air New Zealand, and we've got dashboards about why were there delays, customer responses, people's behaviours inside the terminal. Like there's just really, really good data that's being refined into information. So a lot of people talk up having a digital strategy, and we always talk it up, but I have definitely seen evidence as a director in the last 12 months of that data actually really helping us shape strategy around infrastructure spend and stuff. So that's one thing the board's particularly proud of, is that we are delivering on that digital strategy. I just wanted to add that. So keep going.
Okay, so if we move to FY24 full year financial performance, essentially you can see that FY24 is much in line with FY23. So FY23 was a massive step change. On previous years, we'd come out of COVID, I think capacity had increased. So, and FY24 has continued that momentum. I sort of mentioned before about PAX numbers, we were hoping to end the year around 663,000 at one point. We actually ended up at 655. Some of the things that changed in there, particularly in the last quarter, were Air New Zealand's issues around fleet availability, so technical problems with some of their fleet. We've had quite a few weather events between wind and fog in Wellington and Auckland, and then different rain events and things like that. It has really put the network under a lot of pressure. So we've noticed it from capacity into our routes, but also coming back at it the other way, people haven't been flying as much because of prices of flights, which will probably come as no surprise. So it's sort of come at us in both ways. I think Air New Zealand, if you ask them, would actually probably say it's a bit of a blessing that people can't afford to fly right now because they don't have the planes to put on to increase that capacity at the moment. So that really did impact our last quarter, but we still came out of it with a revenue of 13 and an after-tax profit, but before the depreciation adjustment of 2.2 million.
Just, I want to pause you twice, but that depreciation adjustment is effectively the government changed the law on you can't depreciate buildings now for tax anymore, so you had to do a big write-back. So if you look at someone like what was our impact?
3.1.
If you look at Nelson Airport, theirs was 6, so they've got a nice profit until that. It's just a non-cash adjustment, but I don't like reporting net profit after tax as a loss, but it's basically a bookkeeping entry. So we internally, we look at it adjusted for that because it's a one-off adjustment, so.
I think it's fair to say that we ended the year in quite a strong position around gearing ratios, so we're less than 30%, so 29.8. I think we've been targeting that 30%. We do expect that to grow a little bit during FY25 because we will need to borrow to fund some of the infrastructure that we need to actually upgrade during this year. Let's put that one. If we look at passenger numbers, so essentially you can see on this graph, you can see sort of the growth from June right through to about February, and the numbers just keep ticking up, and then that last quarter really just go exactly back the opposite way. So that is, we have definitely noticed slowing in passenger demand. So our loads, I think this time last year I probably would have talked about load factors of late 80s, early 90%. On some routes, we're down as low as mid-70s at this point, particularly Wellington. Wellington is just, it's a hard market, I think it's fair to say. But Christchurch is particularly strong. That sits probably up around 84, 85% still, and Auckland is still around the 84%. So we're hanging in there. We had a meeting with Air New Zealand a week ago, and they are committed to the Napier-Auckland route especially, which is really pleasing because that's more than half our passengers. And they are looking to add services in the last quarter of FY25, so up to 6 additional ATR services a week. So there is some growth coming. At the moment, we're modelling what the impact of some of the cancellations and the delays is on what that full year number looks like, because I think that's probably quite an important piece to understand at the moment, because obviously all our pricing is set on an assumed passenger number. So just in terms of commercial revenue, in FY23 we had massive growth. We had 77% growth in commercial revenue, and it was all around really stressing some of our advertising assets a little bit more than we had. We took the opportunity to look at rents and OPEX and things like that that hadn't been done for quite some time. So FY24 has been a year of really bedding that in and looking for new opportunities. The car park continues to perform financially really well for us, and is in line with last year despite reduced passenger numbers. So what we're seeing is people are actually staying longer. So the average duration of stay now is longer than it has been in the past. So I think average transaction fee is about $27 in that main car park, whereas before it was around 23. So really seeing some changes in behaviours there. What we are looking to do going forward to really maximise this is to we are looking at a full strategy around landside. So how do we improve things like our car park design and layout, because it's not ideal. And so we'll be presenting that to the board next week at Strategy Day. But we're also looking at how we start moving more to digital assets, and what that means is what sort of additional advertising revenue and things can we have by doing things a little bit differently. So really planning on some growth in this area in FY25, but year on year, FY24, 3% increase, so fairly flat.
And there is a reasonably significant chunk of budget for repairs and maintenance on that car park area as well, because it does get hammered. It gets a lot of traffic through there. So our asset management planning has identified that obviously as an area, so there's $1 million or so set aside to repair the car park, so
And
never
to make
ends.
subtle improvements.
What's that?
To make subtle improvements.
That's right.
I mean, most of you have probably sat in the P120 car park trying to get out along with everyone else in Napier and got a little bit frustrated. So we're working to actually make some changes to that to improve that. So now we get to FY25 progress to date. So at the end of quarter one, our passenger numbers 156,000 versus our SOI of 166. So we're actually 6% down on passenger numbers through the terminal year to date. Average load factor is really holding up, 83.9%, and our SOI was 82.5. So we are still ahead there. However, it is still impacted by cancellations and delays, and because our numbers we don't record cancellations, we can't charge for them. So, some of the loads are being pushed because there's less service. So, like I say, we are really managing this one really closely. So I think on average our delays are about 6%. No, our cancellations are about 6%, but there's something like 57% of flights are delayed more than 15 minutes. So it's actually fairly significant. In terms of financials, our profit after tax is actually tracking really well. We're sitting around that 800K mark, just finalised the numbers yesterday, so it's well ahead of SOI. Some of the key reasons for that, revenue's pretty much tracking to SOI, but some of our costs, we've actually really managed to pull some of our costs out of our structure. So, and I think the other thing is at the moment, one of our big capital projects is to install new runway lights. So we have to buy those assets from Airways. They're divesting. So we've actually chosen to install a new system because the old system, ex-Airways, was a little bit flimsy and becoming unreliable. So those costs will start tracking from January. So we will maybe have a bit of a catch-up there. It is budgeted, though.
It's interesting that most infrastructure organisations I've been associated with have 2 or 3 really key assets, and for an airport it's runway lights and fire trucks. If those 2 assets are not humming, you immediately stand down as an airport. So the lighting project has been a huge focus for management and the board, particularly with Airways getting out of that, transitioning to us. We want to make sure the new assets are appropriate and fit for purpose, and we're building a new fire station to house that new truck. So those are the 2. If you remember one thing from today, it's lights and trucks. Otherwise, we don't have an airport. So we are hugely focused on those.
In terms of people, we've made some massive improvements this year in our health and safety processes, as well as the human resource side of our business. So I think we were fairly light on some process and policies around that area. So we've really spent a lot of time improving our critical risk framework from a health and safety point of view, but also we've done a role realignment just to get some clarity amongst the team about who's actually doing what, and we're starting to see the benefits of that. Just another point that I've just got there, we have refreshed all our emergency management plans in the last 6 months, so starting with the business continuity plan, but also working right down to more recently a volcanic ash plan when we thought that we may have been impacted by the Whakaari eruption about 2 months ago. So we've now got a really robust set of emergency plans in place, and we'll be doing some desktop exercises to test how robust in the next 6 months. From a sustainability and resilience point of view, I think we are defending our site, so we have actively committed CapEx to maintaining, refurbishing, upgrading some of the infrastructure around that. So that's things like pump stations. We've installed piezometers to actually track where our water tables are. And we are also, from a tech point of view, we've committed to the Urban Resilience Explorer tool, which allows us to model like past events, but also overlay future events and see where our key risks are in terms of coastal inundation, tsunami, liquefaction, just to help us understand which areas we really need to start or continue to work on. Talked about retaining our ACA 4+ carbon accreditation. That's actually in place till 2026. And so now we're reviewing what the next steps look like. So for us, that is around broader ESG frameworks and how they might apply in our business. And that's about it. These are just our vision, mission, values that we've agreed on for the year, as well as our strategic post. So you will have seen those in the report and the SOI. And that's us.
Kia ora kōrua, thank you very much. That was a really helpful summary of what is a very thorough and full report for the last financial year. It made for really interesting reading, especially across the scope of mahi that you guys are involved in. So I'll just open up to the table for questions. Mayor Wise.
Thank you, through the chair. Just reflecting on the challenges that you're experiencing at the moment with Air New Zealand with regards to cancellations and delays, how are they engaging with you to support you as you try to deal with that within your operating environment?
I think actually the engagement so far is going more the other way. So we are actively engaging with them so that we can understand what the next or the imminent future looks like. We do get access to their schedules every week. So we are looking at those often. We have a really good relationship with the regional airports person at Air New Zealand. And so we have quarterly airport catch-ups just via Teams. And yeah, we actually took the opportunity to go and ask them some of the hard questions last week. Did we get some great answers? Yes? No? But to be fair, I think they're sort of grappling a little bit with what next looks like for them as well. So all we can do, I mean, we were super stoked for them to tell us that we were considered now one of the main trunk routes because we didn't know that. We can see it in terms of loads and passengers, but it's like number 4 or 5 for them. So they are really keen to protect that route. So I actually took quite a bit of comfort from that, and we'll just keep watching to see and make sure that some of these new ATR services are coming. Yeah.
It's been a strong focus for the board to actively encourage management to do that because they are our number one customer, and we have to work closely with them. And there's been some things we could tidy up, like maintenance contracts for our baggage belts and stuff that they didn't really like, that we weren't overly sharp on. So we openly said fine and fix that up. So we have to. But they are battling. They've got an aging domestic fleet. The Q300s and ATRs are real warriors, but they are aging, so they are battling with what does next look like from them past 2030. So, but we want to be seen as a positive customer of theirs and a positive place to interact with. So when they're looking at maximising that aging fleet, they maximise it to Hawke's Bay. And so far, management in Air New Zealand get along well, but there are some natural tensions, but we want to be seen as being a proactive airport to do business with. So.
Thank you. And just a follow-up question, I guess, really, is there anything that we can do as one of your shareholders to support you and within that relationship? We obviously have relationships directly with Air New Zealand as well. So just yell out if you think there's anything we can do to support that. Because
I think that they really appreciate the fact that the tourism stuff, the marathon, all the stuff that we do, you guys are much closer to what's that pulse of the region possibly than we are. So they really appreciate getting that feedback because they have analysts that plug all that stuff in and try to figure out routes for what's going on. So I really appreciate that because we do have to put a collective foot forward with Air New Zealand. I think they really appreciate that.
One of the things we did actually talk about last week was actually creating a regional calendar of events, and they're looking at people more than 50. So 50 is sort of their baseline to look at whether they'd put additional services on. And one of the things that, for example, they had no visibility to was the Highland Games at Easter. So what we need to work probably constructively as a region on is creating that calendar so that we can be forefront and really pushing it when things are happening. So they know about the big events, like obviously things like, big mission concerts, marathon, Art Deco, but what they want to know about is, even if there's school trips and things like that, so that they need to think about what their service looks like. So I think we can really make some inroads there.
Yeah.
They're effectively saying if they're under pressure route-wise and fleet-wise, the more heads up they can get. If they've got one or two spare planes in the system and they know they've got to allocate it to us in July,
Yeah.
they just need to get a heads up in advance of that. So that's actually positive that they're asking for all that
yeah.
stuff, really.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report. In the financial section, I was looking to reacquaint myself with the dividend situation as I was reading through. I note that we've said there was an agreement with all shareholders for no dividend for this financial year just been. Can you remind me, I tend to remember that there was an agreement that wasn't necessarily based on year timeframes, but on repayment of some debt, or are you able to speak to what that situation is and what is coming?
I think last year, it's fair to say we really focused on repaying debt where we could, because there comes the argument about, and particularly from Treasury, don't become too highly geared, repay debt, but also pay us a dividend. So the balance we struck in FY24 was to try and repay debt where we could and restructure our debt facilities to pay less interest. It is something we're discussing into FY25.
And we are conscious that we haven't paid a dividend for a long time. And I don't want to preempt next month's AGM, but it could be a positive meeting. But we are conscious of that. And one thing I can give you as shareholders real comfort on is we've traditionally had an asset management plan that Becca has helped us prepare, which is great, but it's tagged Becca, right? And so we put a lot of work in our asset manager and Rochelle and the team. We've got a really sharp asset management plan now that we own, and it does show that core business does have a requirement to spend a lot of money over the next decade, a new fire station, $6 to $8 million, et cetera. But the board's not overly comfortable not paying a dividend, so all I can say is next month's meeting should be a positive meeting. So we are really conscious of that, because not paying a dividend doesn't sit overly well with me. We've got to balance up debt repayment, CapEx, and even if it's a small dividend, it's still, I think it's appropriate to pay when we're coming out of COVID. We've got a good handle on our spend. We can earn a rate of return on our assets with Air New Zealand, so that's all stabilised. So we are in the mood to address that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That all sounds very positive, forward-looking. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Gregg.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you. I was intrigued to read about the resurfacing of the apron, and just wondering, a technical question, how often do you have to do that?
I don't think the apron's about every 5 years, and it was supposed to have been done a year ago, and then the cyclone hit and the asphalt plants were wiped out. So that's been quite a challenge in terms of getting access to mobile plants that are already busy fixing up other infrastructure around the place. So that was actually quite a massive project, and there was quite a lot of night work done to do that. But yeah, every 5 years. I think our next big thing is the runway in about 2028, 29. That's the next big requirement.
It's where the planes turn is where you need to do the most maintenance. When they land flat on the runway, it still denigrates the pavement, but where they're turning all the time is the one it's a 5 to 7 years max. You've got to keep resurfacing. So, and the runway's in great shape, but it always has to be overlaid and tidied up. So when the engineers assess our runway, there's a lot of green. So it's in good shape, but it's in good shape because we maintain it. So we have to put CapEx aside every 5 to 6 years to overlay that as well. So, and which is a big job. You've got to do a lot of that at night time, which adds to cost too, of course. So.
And just one from me, this is out of curiosity. I noted that, I can't remember the terminology, but I think it was first port of call. There was...
place of first arrival.
First arrival, sorry. Certification or whatever the mechanism is. Obviously, in this instance, at this time, geared towards high-value customers, etc. Does that have any impact on your long-term planning around asset and revenue considerations?
Probably, like that would imply international service, and that's not on our radar. I mean, I think our first radar is more around what the domestic future looks like for us, and really pushing Napier as one of their key spoke ports. Air New Zealand are definitely keen for the hub and spoke model in terms of getting to Auckland or Wellington, but mostly Auckland, and getting a further service. So they've now announced their $100, their $100 fare from a regional port to Auckland as a connection. We have engaged with Jetstar, but once again, more domestically. And there's a significant amount of spend, and I think some of the CAA spend requirements to support international services are actually almost placing it out of reach.
But it is, we're really pleased to have that. And I think your question was from an infrastructure point of view, because there's smaller jets and stuff, and there's plenty of places to park them. It's all good. So we just welcome that and would love to see more of it, but it is restricted to certain such smaller jets, really.
Yeah.
Between 12 and 20 seat jets.
Thank you. I think it's really useful for the community, especially when these are the types of questions and comments that you see popping up all over the place, and you hear from them as well, wondering about these kinds of things. So it's really helpful just to hear it from the
It
horses.
is really, and it is, you've seen Hamilton announce that they're going to bring back, but, my experience with regional ports like that, when they bring, you've got to have a runway long enough to do it, which we don't. Bigger jets consistently, and then there's often an element of underrate to bring that. So there's quite a few considerations. So at the moment, it's just the cost. It would be significant, and we would have to be coming to shareholders for an equity injection to do that.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything further they'd like to add? No? We'll move to the office's recommendation that we receive the Hawke's Bay Airport Limited annual report and auditor's report for the year ended 30 June 2024. Can I have someone to move that, please? Mayor Wise, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Mawson. Would you like to speak to it, Mayor Wise?
Thank you, through the chair. Just to say, lovely to have you here with us today. Very comprehensive reports and incredible outcomes when you've still got a lot of challenges that you're dealing with on a daily basis. So keep up the good work, and looking forward to seeing how 2025 pans out.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Mawson, would you like to?
No, the Mayor, thanks very much, team. No, good on you. You're very thorough. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm assuming no one else would like to speak to that motion, and therefore I will put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, and that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers, team.
Thank you so much, guys. Right. Our second paper of the day, budgets to be carried forward to 24-25, and we have Talia to present the paper.
Right, thank you. I am tabling some changes today. I believe all those changes have been made available to the councillors, and I will speak to them. Just as a quick recap, carry forwards are a mechanism to enable us to continue projects that haven't quite been finished and ensure that the funding is available for the upcoming year, and update the budgets internally for that so that we are tracking them correctly. So the changes for capital, we have been able to remove some of the carry forwards that we don't believe will be completed in the current year. We are changing the total to $19,833,465 to be moved from the 23-24 year into 24-25. The activity groups that are affected by that are community and visitor experiences, property assets, stormwater and wastewater, and it is a mixture of the funding, but mostly coming out of rates. For the OPEX, we are changing the total to be carried forward to $3,156,607, and that is affecting community and visitor experiences, other infrastructure and support units, again with a mixture of funding, mainly being loans funded at that time. I will take the rest as read if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Talia. Thanks for giving us that update as well. We'll open for questions from the table. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Talia, for the report. There was an attachment to the agenda called Removed by ELT CapEx, and I'm just trying to reconcile that within the paper. So is the total from that attachment, can you direct me to how that is referenced in the report?
The total of that, and sorry, there isn't a total on that one, but it is the difference between the original 22,535,000 and the new 19,833. Then there was a new attachment with the total CapEx to make it back to the 19 million.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for that. That was helpful. I guess my question is around some of those CapEx items that have been removed, and I wonder if ELT could potentially speak to, in particular, I'm interested in the surface water quality master plan removal. That's quite an important piece of work in my view, and so I'm just interested. I see the note in there around it coming in after Te Muruai o Te Whanga plan. Being that we have that draft plan now, I'm just wondering why the removal of that from this current year. It seems like it's in train to continue this year.
We'll ask Russell if he can speak to that one.
Sorry, yes. The understanding was it's a timing issue in terms of the budgeting, so it's not that it's not going to get done, it's just it wasn't necessary to be done in the next 6 months. So therefore it was looking to move that into the next annual plan.
Am I able to probe a little bit further into why we can't continue with this mahi over the next 6 months? I know it's been postponed previous. I would have thought it was at a stage where we could continue with it. And just for the table's context, it's a I think quite a important precursor to the Ahuriri Regional Park workstream as well, that overall water quality master plan.
Happy for that decision to be changed. It was just more that in terms of the priority of the things that ELT was looking at, it didn't rank up there to warrant being in the carryover in terms of a work in progress. It contractually, it didn't have a work in progress contractual element to it, and it had the timing was able to be moved into another financial year. So that was the reasoning in behind those decisions. So, but if it's something that council wishes to keep and retain to focus on, then that's up to council to decide to retain it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if you're happy to take a comment as part of discussion, or I'm happy to reserve a comment on that one.
I'm looking for some guidance. I've gone back to the paper, and sorry, just as in discussion, gone back to the paper, and I've realised that we weren't actually aware of the criteria that has been used to assess the projects that have been removed by ELT at this stage, and I think that that's perhaps where some of these questions may be coming from. I actually have one myself around how have we decided what is being removed. I see that our CE has turned her camera on, Louise, so I'm assuming that you would like to make comment to that.
Yes, please. So look, our rationale was that we have a massive capital programme currently, which, as we are all aware, we're not meeting the targets of where we want to be at. We had last year, when we looked at carry forwards, been very clear that we didn't want to be in the same position as we had been previously, and unfortunately we found ourselves in the same position of actually an increase in the number of projects being carried forward from the previous year. So we wanted to be, I guess, signalling to the business that what we're seeing is a number of projects are not really in the stage that they're likely to get delivered in the next 6 months. The project plans in place, procurement plans are not in place. So we just really wanted to put a lens of realism across that as to whether they are likely to be achieved. So we started with projects that were already in train and just haven't been progressed as quickly as we had anticipated. So they went into the pot. Those that had external funding, those
Well, we'll have Caroline take that over, thank you.
Louise, just pop back on.
Oh, no. Okay, Louise is back. But you are on mute at the moment, Louise. And still on mute, it would appear.
Yeah,
There you go.
sorry.
There you go.
Apologies. My internet has crashed at the moment, so I'm trying to do it on my phone. So there were a number of criteria, basically. Those in train, those with external funding, they got through automatically. Then we looked at all of the other projects and then made a decision that we would try to move those projects which weren't in a position or unlikely to make much progress in this next 6-month period, to move them into the annual plan. So they're not being stopped. I guess it was just the realism of putting that capital programme or continuing adding to our current capital programme things that we are not confident will be delivered in that period, rather than move them into next year's annual plan. And it was on the basis, say, of those that have started, those that have external funding being our key priorities. But the ultimate driver was we'd made a call last year and we're trying to work with our managers to say that carry forwards are not really something we want to be doing. And so we were trying to get our level back to at least where we were last year, which last year was higher than we wanted. So I hope that makes some sense. And apologies, I keep dropping out.
Thank you, Louise. Deputy Mayor Brosnan, does that provide you with some confidence, or would you like us to have an action out of this meeting, perhaps, that we discuss this as part of our first annual or our next annual plan workshop, and that forms part of that session together? Would that be okay?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Completely understand and agree with the rationale that Louise has set out. That particular line item, I received some confidence from staff was underway earlier this year. I'm really uncomfortable with taking it out because it has been delayed for a number of years. So I would be very, very comfortable if that became part of our discussions as part of the annual plan, but wouldn't be comfortable voting to remove that today.
Thank you, that's nice and clear. Councillor Price.
Yes, for the Chair. With the carryover, how does that affect our CapEx for this financial year? Does it make it achievable, or how far short?
So through the Chair, the carryover, I think it's mentioned in the paper, means that our capital plan total for this year that we're in now becomes in the order of 120 million. There is about, I think, 13 million of that relates to parklands, so that's fairly easy sort of kind of capital to achieve. But it's still higher than what we'd like. We are in a process, and it's being run in conjunction with the work we're doing on the local water done well, to look at our capital phasing again for the next at least 3 years and rephase. And we'll be also doing that through the annual plan process, which will come back to you through the workshops.
Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Use your arm.
Can you hear me now, Madam Chair?
Thank you. Go
Lovely,
ahead.
thank you. I have 2 questions. One is related to the nature of the projects. Do we understand how many of these projects would have been 1-year projects, in other words, started and finished in the financial year, versus how many of the projects or the percentage of projects that are multi-year, so therefore the funding may have simply been a sequencing issue?
Through the Chair. Yes, we do have that information, and it's contained in our budgets. So we can. I can't give you the total number of those carry forwards. I'd have to come back to you on that.
Thank you. And the other question I have is some of these capital expenditures are loan funded, so therefore taking up the loans will be deferred. So this provides us some advantage as interest rates decline.
That's correct. So obviously the less capital work we do, the less we borrow for the loan-funded projects, and therefore the less borrowing and interest costs we incur.
Okay. Not that I'm saying we should be encouraged by
No.
that, but I would be curious to find out which projects should have been completed in the financial year and for what reasons they haven't been. But perhaps again that can be deferred until our annual plan discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. We'll make sure that the minutes record that too. Mayor Wise.
Thank you. Through the chair. In the background summary, there's a figure of 59.7 million of completed total capital spend, compared to the table of completed delivered capital projects, which is 33.3 million. So just for clarification, is that difference of 26 odd million projects that haven't yet been completed? So they're partway through. Okay.
Yes, that's right. So they will be in work in progress.
Work in progress. Yeah. Okay. And sorry, just a follow-up question. I note in the detailed table of capital works completed or capital projects completed, there's a number of lines against activities, gifted vested assets. If you could just explain what that actually means.
Yes, sure. So vested assets are the assets typically from developers of a residential development, as an example. As part of that development, they may create the pathways, roads, reserves, gardens, and they give that back to the council. So it becomes an asset of ours, potentially also with some costs for future operations.
So them being included on this list is because they have been vested in us within this financial year?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. And sorry, just asking the question.
Yeah.
So who's actually completed the work? Has the developers completed the work and then they've vested the assets in us?
Yes, that's right.
And sorry, question.
Yeah,
who's actually paid for it?
Yeah.
The developers, I believe, typically are paying for that.
Through the chair, we receive financial or development contributions from the developers to as their contribution towards the creation of that asset. And sometimes there is a portion of that cost that council funds as well. And then once the asset's been created with the payment from the financial contribution, it's vested back into our books.
Okay. Trying to get my head around how the money's flowing. So we get the financial contribution from the developers. They do the work.
Not always.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do, sometimes they do.
Yep.
And then when the project is completed, the asset becomes vested in us and gets recorded as a completed project.
So just through the chair, yes. So that dollar value in the vesting of assets, then that's the creation of the asset on our asset register to then start the depreciation and the operation and maintenance process Talia mentioned. So our asset portfolio increases by that value that it took to create that asset. And it's part of that subdivision process that we get from the developers.
I think that's clear. I guess the other part of it is it's not very helpful in terms of us understanding what the project is because it's just called gifted vested assets. So I don't know if there's any ability for there to be additional detail as to what it actually relates relates to. So it doesn't really give us a lot of visibility of actually what that asset is that we've taken onto our schedule.
We do have the information, so we could come back with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So sorry, Talia, I didn't quite hear you there. Is that an action?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yes. Through the chair, just a random question. Is 59.7 million, is that near the most we've ever delivered in a year, or where are we tracking in terms of previous performance?
Through the chair, yes, it is.
Okay. And I suppose just a comment, if I may, to strengthen your idea around having a workshop possibly as soon as practical. I am very concerned that we are saying to the community that we will deliver $123 million worth of projects to them in the next financial year, when the most we've ever been able to deliver is under 60 million. And I know we have some project improvement things underway and everything, but doubling our delivery seems quite unrealistic, and I'd like to be more transparent about what we are able to deliver.
Point taken. Thank you, Councillor Brown, and certainly something that we will be covering off in our workshop process as we move towards consultation of our annual plan for the next financial year as well. Do we have any further questions for Talia or Caroline? Just to come back to Deputy Mayor Brosnan's issue around the project that she would not feel comfortable with removing from our capital or from the carry forwards, just putting out there what is the appetite from around the table to have that removed, or if I could get some advice from our officers as to how we might remove that in this instance.
Through the chair. We can include that in our carry forwards, so we can put it back in, and then obviously we can revisit it again through the annual plan process if you want to look at it again then.
Be very happy with that.
Yeah, and just discussion from the table around, does anyone have any comment on that consideration?
Can we have a little bit of narrative of the implications of that?
Certainly, that's a great question for our officers. Any implications?
Sorry, yeah. So no, a lot of it's been externally funded, and it's really the staff time coordinating, working through, doing the thinking, helping structure that. There'll be, in terms of the master plan, there's a bit of, there'll be some consultation processes with mana whenua and our estuary groups and the likes of that. So a lot of it will be in that staff time coordination, but there's external consultants that can assist with that.
Thank you, Russell. Any further discussion? No. We're just reviewing our recommendation as it stands and wondering whether that could form an action out of this paper to remove that. The numbers that are currently in the recommendation will need to be adjusted to take that into consideration. So, thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Madam Chair, perhaps we could just add on to the end of the point B with the minor adjustment to the CapEx carry forwards.
Cool. Just I'm just mindful of the change in. Who would like to do some quick maths for me, Caroline?
So that particular item, I think, is around is 69,000. That was removed. That had been removed from the carry forwards, and we're saying that we would like to reinstate that.
Yeah.
So we will need to add to that 19 million total.
Yeah.
69,612.
I believe the new total will be 19,903,077.
Thank you. That's what I'm looking for.
Sorry, 903 in the middle there.
All right. And that's to A. Thanks, Gemma. Thank you. Great. So we have a revised officer's recommendation in front of us. Is there any more discussion, or can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan, moving. I'm happy to second from the chair. Would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, I think it's a really positive step that our executive team is turning their minds proactively to what projects can and shouldn't be carried forward. I know our culture and our processes over a number of years have sort of been to carry everything forward with the expectation that if it dropped off, it wouldn't be funded. And I am enjoying seeing how that culture is changing and that more proactive approach to what goes forward, speaking to Councillor Brown's point around transparency of delivery. So appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I only have here to add to that. I think you've captured everything really well. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? No? In that case, I will put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? And that's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Talia. Thanks, team. Now, I don't see the presenter for our next paper in the room, so we will go to paper number 4, which is our Treasury Activity and Funding Update. Oh, sorry. My apologies. So no one was available from the Hawke's Bay Museums Trust, so I assume that we're going to have Talia and Caroline team this one as well. Thanks, guys.
Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, Dick Grant, well, fortunately for him, he's overseas travelling, so he wasn't able to make it today. So we are presenting the Hawke's Bay Museums Trust annual report for the year ending June, ending 30 June 2024. They have made a surplus for the year of 315,000, and the report has been reviewed by Audit New Zealand with no issues found. Other than that, I'll take the report as read. Thank you.
Thanks, Talia. Open for questions. I have just one. I noted in the statement of financial position there's an insurance line that seems very low, but also later on in the report there's also the insurance line, which I'm assuming covers the collection. So my first question was, in the financial position one, what does that insurance refer to?
And so the small one in the financial position, the 2,500, is liability insurance for the trustees. The majority of the insurance for the collection is covered in the management fees, the 1.2 million in the statement of financial performance, which is the fee paid to Napier City Council for a lot of other things as well.
Thank you. My other question, Talia, was around the increase there in those lines, the insurance line and the energy line. Are they simply inflationary, or are there other reasons for that?
It is just to do with the increases that everybody's experiencing with the energy and insurance. The insurance will also be increasing as the value of the collection increases as well.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Probably can't be answered by staff. It's probably a question that does need to go back to the board. Under note number 9, unspent grants, I'm just curious as to how many of those grants are targeted to a particular project or are targeted to a particular period of time and whether they represent any risks, but obviously staff may not have that information.
And no, we don't have that information. We would need to come back.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. We'll take that away as an action and make sure that you get a response to that.
Thank you.
Anything further? No? Well, we have the recommendation in front of us that we receive the Hawke's Bay Museum Trust annual report for the year ended 30 June 2024. Can I have someone to move that, please? Thank you, Councillor Gregg, and seconded. Councillor Mawson, thank you. Councillor Gregg, would you like to speak to that?
No, just to say it's a great report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor, nothing further? Anyone else? No? Well, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Talia. And this time, after a false start, welcome Gary for our Treasury activity and funding update.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, the purpose of this report is to update Prosperous Napier Committee on Council's Treasury activity. So a challenge that we have is the value of time when producing these reports. Sometimes material events occur between finalising and presenting the report. So although it was flagged in a report, Council borrowed a further 10 million of funds on Monday the 10th of October, so this last Monday. 2 issues of 5 million each were borrowed for periods of 3 and 7 years, and that's to sort of fill in our maturity profile. Due to borrowings, our cash balance is currently sitting at a little over 15 million. And so on Friday, I'll be arranging a term deposit tender to reinvest the surplus balance. I'll take the remainder of the report as read.
Thanks for the update, Gary. We're open for questions. I've got one. There's a line in here that says the primary consideration for placing deposits is timing the need for future expenditure with returns a secondary consideration. Can you give me an example of the types of things we would look to use that term deposit balance for?
Of course. So at the moment, given that we are holding relatively low cash balances compared to what we did historically, a lot of this is looking at our week-to-week expenditure. So at the moment, just for a little bit of comfort, we're holding about 5 million of cash balance, which I'd like to reduce. But then every week we have approximately 2 to 5 million maturing, depending on our needs. And so a lot of that will be based on a lot of what we call that Friday creditor run. And so that may be some larger projects coming through where we could have, say, $1 million payments, that sort of thing happening. So it really is just a basket of things that we're looking at and trying to project our sort of required cash flow for those periods. So, and when we have those met for a reasonable period of time, then I'll also be looking at the yield curve to see what bargains we might be able to pick up in the future.
Right, thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I just want a clarification on that new lending. Was that replacement lending, in other words, existing loans that have matured or changed, or is that about new capital assets or assets that have now been capitalised through loans?
Okay, so this is all new borrowing. So for the loans that we've currently got in place, the first maturity we've got is in April 2026. So anything at this point that we borrow will be all new.
I can see perhaps you have a subsequent question there, Councillor Simpson.
Yeah. So is that to do with our capital projects having now been capitalised and becoming assets, and therefore we need to lend money to meet that cost, or is this bridging finance to meet our cash flows?
So when it comes to the borrowing that I do, I don't actually look at that. I'm looking more at the cash flow that's required. So it will be a basket of meeting the timing of receipts of things such as our quarterly rates instalments, but also there will be capital expenditure in there for some of those projects. So it really is a mix of the two. So bridging is not quite the right word, but yeah.
Through the chair.
Yeah.
The borrowing requirement is for capital projects, so we'll have contract payments for capital projects or assets that we're building or creating that we need to pay out every month or week, and we've got to the point where we need to borrow to pay for them. So a lot of that borrowing is tagged to capital works.
Thank you. That's the clarification. I wanted to check that that's what it was about, rather than about us buying the groceries. Thank you.
Oh, no, that's a bad business practice in anybody's books. If we were at that point, I would be very worried.
Thank you, guys. Any further questions for Gary or Caroline? No? We have a recommendation here, which I'm happy to move from the chair, that we receive the report titled Treasury Activity and Funding Update. Do I have a seconder for that motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Mawson. I'm happy not to speak to it yourself. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
Next up, we have our Cyclone Gabriel Category 3 voluntary buyout progress update. I'd like to welcome Richard Minaker and Anne Bradbury to present the paper.
Through the chair, just would like to report firstly that progress has been really solid with the Category 3 buyout, and it's sort of interesting to reflect when you start a new activity that council's never done before, don't really know how it's going to go. I think it feels from us, having been involved in it, that we've coming out the other side in a really good way. We've been working, as you know, with our partners, Hastings District Council, through a joint voluntary buyout office, which we both are funding, but it is held in Hastings because they have the majority of the properties. And Anne and I have been effectively the community facilitators for the 14 properties that have been categorised as Category 3, and working through with all of those. And we are now very much in the last stages of developing offers and having them accepted, with only one that is unlikely to be resolved anytime soon. And I think that's really amazing, to be honest. Also, in terms of our ones, and Hastings too, for that matter, the level of acceptance has been really high, and so it's been a success in terms of implementation. We are well underway also with site remediation and demolition of the residential buildings, and you may see those results if you're travelling north along the highway. You can see it's in the last few weeks even, it has changed quite a lot from looking pretty rough to now it's the houses are largely gone, and there has been the Cyclone Task Force has cleaned up the silt and remediated a lot of the sites, and we have also had our demolition guys taking away all the rubbish and things, so it's looking really quite good out there now comparatively. Yeah. And lastly, and importantly, the costs are on track. We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Richard. Really good news. So yeah, it's great all round. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? Councillor Price.
Thank you. Just like to comment on the joint approach that's taken. Have Hastings been the leader in that and we've followed, or how's that worked?
Yes, largely, I guess, because they do have the lion's share of the properties to deal with, and they also have the lion's share of the complexities of the properties, because you just get more of those the more you have. So we have very much we have funded our portion, but very much tried not to get in the way of them having to resolve some very complicated things, and they've run a really good process in doing that, which we are in the slipstream, if you like, and we get the benefit of that approach, and we do pay for it. So the policy is a jointly paid for by both of us, but they are largely driving that and procuring, the advice and things to make that policy happen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Any further questions? No? Well, as we said before, Richard, it is all really good news, and hats off to you guys for the work that you've done. It may only be 14 properties, but that's those are our community. Those are people with lives that have had huge upheaval. So, we can't minimise the importance of the work that you guys have done, so thank you. The officer's recommendation, Councillor Price has said that he will move it. Do I have someone to second it? Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Price, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I think it's very well done, and I think when we talk about 14 properties, it's bigger than that. And at a meeting last week it's the people that live along the hillside that were traumatised by this event, and starting to see the valley looking a little bit normal, not scrunched up wire and old houses, has a big effect on the whole community. So it is really good that we're getting this fixed with haste. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with everything that Councillor Price has just said, and I just want to add to that about the meetings that you've had with the staff the community out there. Thank you for your engagement with them, and thank you for the way that you've worked through what we do with that land. And in that meeting that we had, I felt a real sense of genuine appreciation that they were consulted and felt part of the process around what we do with them as landers. We're essentially their neighbours now. So thank you. I think it's been a good process.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Gregg.
Oh yes, through the chair. Just a comment. I think this is a really good example of Hastings District Council and Napier City Council working in collaboration. So just a big thank you to all the staff, and especially Richard and Anne. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? And that's carried. Thanks, team. Just before I look for someone to move us into public excluded, I've been reminded that Councillor Bogue actually had a question that she would have raised in minor matters regarding the announcement from the central government around fast-track projects. And so Russell Bond is going to provide us with an update as to what that means for us, given that there was a project that we're collaborating on listed in that. So I'll hand over to you, Russell.
Thank you. Yes, excuse me. If you can recall, we had a report come to the Sustainable Napier on the 16th of May this year. We had 2 projects that we had applied through the fast-track process. One was the Taradale and Awatoto Borefield projects, and the other was the Maranui IAF consenting project with Kainga Ora support. So unfortunately, the Maranui project wasn't successful in the process, but we were successful with the Taradale Borefield and Awatoto Borefield project. So what it does mean is it just allows us to streamline some of the consenting process. It doesn't remove any of the key processes like consultation or impact assessment work that often is a concern. It just helps with some of the timing and just removing some of that process delays to help move the project along, so hence the name Fast Track. So the question around, I think there was a couple of questions around the difference in cost. It's just going to reduce some of the costs. Rather than having 2 consents processes, we can combine the 2 together and have the one consent process. It's really the savings in time and a little bit of consulting fees and that. So So yeah, happy to take, if there are any further questions. It's unfortunate Councillor Bogue isn't here today, so yeah, but I can touch base with Maxine when she comes back and answer any other further concerns if she has any questions. Sorry.
Thanks, Russell. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Brown.
Kia ora, thank you for that, and through the chair. Just, can you talk to the flip side of that? So if it's a fast track process, does that essentially mean that these projects get priority, like a priority bus lane, essentially, through our consenting processes? And who's doing the consenting? Is it still us, or is it HBRC, or?
No, so the consenting is still done through HBRC. It's just, it just has a different, I guess, a work program. At this point, it's still, we've applied for the process. The project may still not require us to go down that avenue. So we still have the choice of following one or the other. It's just, it just provides a different process for us to take for this process to help, bring about the project in a more timely manner. So,
yeah, thank you. And just, I suppose it's more for the regulatory team. Is there any fast track process? Like, do we have to do something different within our regulatory team when we're doing consents on our side?
I would believe so. It's not my side of expertise, so.
We can certainly take that question.
It'd be a good question for Rachel, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just interested in how much disruption or extra resources they might need. Yeah.
Great point, thank you. And Russell, just confirming that this project, of course, will continue to form part of our reporting that comes through Sustainable Napier as well.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Any further questions? No, great. We'll let you out of the hot seat.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll look to move ourselves into public excluded. We've got 3 agenda items there. Thank you, Councillor Tareha, for moving. If I can have someone to second. Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Is that okay? Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against and carried. Thank you.